Sports is on the air. From Wrigley Field in Chicago, Gillette presents the World Series. Men, look sharp, feel sharp, be sharp. Use Gillette Blue Blades with the sharpest edges ever honed. Good afternoon, baseball fans everywhere. This is Bill Slater with Al Helfer and Bill Corum greeting you for the Gillette Safety Razor Company as the Chicago Cubs and Detroit Tigers get ready for the deciding seventh game in this thrilling 1945 championship series. Gillette is on the air the year round with on-the-spot reports of leading sports events, including the Kentucky Derby, football bowl games, and similar classics. Gillette also broadcasts the major boxing match of the week regularly every Friday night. And now this afternoon in Chicago, on the shores of Lake Michigan, we await breathlessly the start of this seventh and deciding game of the 1945 series. A series that has been at the same time one of the zaniest, most thrilling, and record-smashing series in a long, long while. Records have been broken in total number of players involved, total number of pinch hitters involved, records smashed in total income, records smashed in the longest game in the point of time ever played, that 12-inning struggle on Monday. And only 36,185 are needed to come into the stands this afternoon to top the all-time attendance record set back in 1926 between the Yanks and the Cards. And three pitchers have appeared in this series, who the first time out were practically invincible but could not come through the second time. Virgil Trucks, Claude Passeau, Dizzy Trout. And then there's been one pitcher who was no good the first time and came back to win the second time, and that's Hal Newhouser. And he's going to try to repeat today. And then there's been Fordham Hank Borowy, who the first time out, yes, the second time, no. And Monday, he came through for his second victory, and Borowy will be trying to place himself in the immortal halls of baseball by striving for his third victory as he pitches for the Cubs this afternoon. This has been the greatest radio hookup in the history of sports radio, with the broadcast going to Rome, to Berlin, to Tokyo, and all around the world, wherever the far-flung outposts of American military might exist today. And each team in this series has been better in the other's park than it has been at home. And One-Eyed Conley, the world's champion gate crasher, hired on as an usher, has tried to keep the owner of the park, Phil Wrigley, from coming into his own park. We've had some of the coldest weather in any of the series, and yet at the same time some of the most pleasant. And we've had Stanley Hack in that thrilling game on Monday, almost the GOAT with his 2 errors, and then coming through with 4 hits out of 5 to be the hero of the struggle, to drive in the winning run for Chicago in the last of the 12th with 2 out. And we've had the spectacle of an error being charged against Hank Greenberg in left field, and then later in the evening, along about midnight, retracted by the official scores. So in this particular series, one of the most thrilling of all time, and the first 7-game series since the Tigers battled the Cincinnati Reds in 1940, we have had absolutely everything, and this afternoon is going to be the climax. And now to give you his own inimitable view of what's coming up this afternoon is the great sports columnist and our friend, Bill Corum, looking very sharp today, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. And we're right back where we started in Detroit last Wednesday as far as this series goes. Except, of course, that whatever may happen today, saving the remote possibility of a tie game called Because of Darkness, this is payday. Steve O'Neill and Charlie Grimm led with their aces in that first game in Briggs Stadium and are going to lead with them again in this seventh and deciding game. Al Newhouser for the batting Bengals and Hank Borowy for the clawing Little Bears. Which gives Borowy a chance to tie another World Series record, by the way. If the tall Jersey right-hander should win this afternoon, he will become the second pitcher ever to win 3 games and lose 1 in the same series. I think that's true. I wouldn't want to bet all the tea in China on it, even if I had all the tea in China, but I believe that grand pitcher of the Chicago White Sox of many seasons back, old Urban the Red Faber, won 3 games in the 1917 World Series and lost 1. Of course, Matheson, Jack Holmes, the only pitcher beside Borowy ever to win for both leagues, Stan Kovaleski, Babe Adams, and Faber all have won 3 games in 1 series. But none except Faber ever won 3 and also lost 1. And that will be Borowy's record if he can come through this afternoon. If Newhouser's arm was in good shape, you'd have to give him a distinct edge over Borowy and most any other flinger around today as well. But we all know that, unfortunately, Bonnie Prince Hal's arm is not in the best possible shape. Indeed, he's expected to have it operated on during the off-season. It's that bad, or so we understand. On the other hand, Newhouser has had 1 day more rest than Borowy. So the best guess is that, like the previous games and the series itself, this decisive one will be a toss-up where anything can happen. And it isn't as if practically everything hasn't already happened. We've had about everything except a triple play, a balk, and a wetting at home plate. I was happy to see the official scorers change their ruling on Hack's hit that won Monday's 12-inning thriller. If you happened to be listening then, you know how disconcerted and confused I got trying to get the totals of the game straight in my post-game summary. That was partly because I couldn't find on my card where Detroit had more than one error. It turned out that on Hack's hit, the first ruling by the official scorers, Martin Haley, Ed Burns, Henry Salsinger, and Fred Lieb, four of the most competent baseball men around and all eminently fair gentlemen, had been that it was a single for Stan and an error for Hank Greenberg. But it couldn't have been an error for Lank Hank, really. The ball bounced completely and cleanly over his head. The ruling would have made him something of a goat for Detroit, which he definitely didn't deserve to be. On the contrary, he has been one of old Tig's staunchest heroes, if not the staunchest. It happened that sitting here in the radio booth well down the third baseline, Bill Slater, who called the play on Hack's hit, and I were both in a perfect position to watch the ball. And it took practically a perpendicular hop just before it reached Greenberg's hands, which were extended toward it on the ground. By the way, we're so far down the third baseline that we're almost past the big screen back of home plate, which incidentally isn't a screen at all, but a Grand Banks fishing net sent, if my memory serves me, to the elder Wrigley by some friend for his new and beautiful park here. Anyhow, Slater says that it is a very sane thing to have here, but remember, he said it and I didn't. Now, Baroy's record, if it materializes, is not the only one that will be tied, set, and broken in this game. All sorts of new records will fall, but you've heard most of that from Slater's already. The main thing is the game itself. I hope it'll be just half as exciting and pulse-pounding as Monday's sensational Battle Royal. And that the better team will win it, and the series too, of course. It's been a wonderful series, even if it hasn't produced the best baseball ever seen by a mighty long shot. The fans have loved it as they should, and it's been a real pleasure and privilege for us to bring it to you listeners the best we could, particularly to our boys over and on the seas, in the Pacific, Japan, Europe, on their ships, and everywhere they are. Which reminds me, Harry Roberts, baseball writer for the Chicago Daily News and a lieutenant in the Navy, Brother Helper, flew in from San Francisco this morning to see the final game and root for the Cubs. He just landed from the carrier Ticonderoga, straight from Tokyo, and he heard the broadcast of the other games at sea by shortwave. And that's that for now, fans, but I'll be back to give you a quick summary of the highlights when the game ends.
Fans, there's little doubt that Americans want a hard peace for those guilty of starting the war. But none of us wants a hard peace for the millions of destitute men, women, and children in allied countries freed from Axis enslavement. Yet without our help, cruel and bitter times lie ahead for the folks who are still fighting famine, pestilence, and cold. One of the chief hopes for their salvation lies in the National War Fund, a federation of 19 major relief and welfare agencies. These agencies are over there distributing blankets to people who have shivered for years, cod liver oil for undernourished children, seeds to replant farms, medicine to fight plagues, and they're doing many other life-saving tasks. So when you're asked to donate to the Community War Fund, dig down deep, please. Be generous in victory. Now here are the Detroit and Chicago batting orders as we come up to just a few moments before the start of this thrilling seventh and final game of this Spike 45 series. For Detroit, here's the batting order. The leadoff hitter, as usual, will be the shortstop, Jimmy Webb. Batting number 2 will be the second baseman, Eddie Mayo. Batting third will be the center fielder, Roger Kramer, C-R-A-M-E-R. Batting fourth will be big Captain Hank Greenberg, the left fielder. Batting fifth will be Roy Cullenbine, the right fielder. Batting number 6 will be Rudolph York, the first baseman. Batting number 7, Jimmy Outlaw, the third baseman. Batting number 8, Paul Richards, the veteran catcher. And batting ninth, young Prince Hal Newhouser, the talented lefty who is a Detroit boy all the way. So there's the batting order for the Detroit Tigers. For the home-standing and embattled Chicago Cubs, they will bat in this order. The leadoff hitter will be Stanley Hack, the third baseman, who is the hitting star of the series up to this point. Batting number 2 for Chicago, second baseman Don Johnson. Batting third, left fielder Harry Lowry, L-O-W-R-E-Y. Batting fourth, the star first baseman Phil Cavaretta, Chicago boy all the way. Batting number 5, center fielder Handy Andy Pafko, P-A-F-K-O. Batting sixth, the big right fielder Bill Nicholson, N-I-C-H-O-L-S-O-N. Batting number 7, the redoubtable catcher Mickey Livingston. Batting number 8, the veteran shortstop Roy Hughes. And batting number 9th and trying for the Ironman stunt in the 1945 series, Fordham Hank Baroy, the New Jerseyite, who is just now completing his warm-up pitches down in front of the Cub dugout down the third base line. Here are the umpires: Art Passarello of the American League at the plate, Jocko Conlon of the National League at first, Billy Summers of the American League at second, and Lou Jorda of the National League at third. Now that's the way the scene is set at this particular moment, and while we're waiting for the umpires to come to home plate to confer with the rival managers, Jolly Charlie Grimm and Stout Steve O'Neill, we're going to pause 10 seconds here for station identification. Remember, men, look sharp, feel sharp, be sharp. Use Gillette Blue Blades with the sharpest edges ever honed. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
This is WGN Chicago, serving the Middle West.
In the huddle between representatives of the two clubs and the umpires, now going on down at home plate, which is, of course, always the part of the last moments before a game begins, Phil Cavaretta, the playing captain of the Chicago Cubs, is representing Chicago, and Steve O'Neill representing the Detroit Tigers. Now the umpires are fanning out. Incidentally, the alternate umpires here are Charlie Berry of the American League and Lee Ballantyne of the National League. They just dress and sit in the dugouts every day, and it's a very sweet job. Steve O'Neill is moving down to third base now, where he's going to coach, and the Chicago team is coming on the field. Art Mills will coach at first for the Detroit Tigers. And now, with the Cubs out on the field in their proper defensive order, the whole crowd, and it's a throng, rises to its feet. Heads are bared, hands snap up a right hand salute on the part of the military personnel here, and Armand Hand's band plays the national anthem. And now as the most glorious flag that ever rode the breeze flies high from the flagstaff in deep center field with bank flags of the United Nations on its right and on its left. Everything is all set for the start of this 7th and deciding game of this great 45 series. And all set, looking very sharp and feeling very sharp, is our colleague on these broadcasts who will bring you the first 4.5 innings of play, big, handsome Al Helfer.
Well, thanks, Bill. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Rather chilly here in Chicago, as Bill has already told you this afternoon. But nevertheless, we're expecting a humdinger of a ball game. This 7th consecutive World Series that Gillette has brought you. It goes down to the 7th and final game of the entire series. And I think that Ed Wilhelm, who is sitting over here to our left, is probably just as anxious as everyone else here in the stands and in the radio booth to see this ball game get underway. Also very anxious this afternoon is Hank Baroy. I talked to the Fordham Ghost just before the ball game started, and he wants this one. And naturally, so does Hal Newhouser. We spoke briefly with him, too, just before we came up from the playing field up to the radio booth. And these two pitchers will be out there, and as the boys in the trade say, they'll be bowing their neck this afternoon to try to get this final win, to put their team up on top. The umpires, as given you by Bill Slater, are correct. Passarelli at the plate, Conlon at first, Summers at second, and Jorda at third. The lineups, as given you by Bill, are intact also. And we should like to pass this on at the start of this ball game, that the Chicago Cubs, as far as batting is concerned, are out-hitting the Detroit Tigers with a team percentage, as they field right now, of .288, while the Detroit Tigers have a percentage of .202. And Skeeter Webb, who is hitting at .174, the Detroit shortstop, is standing in right now, hitting right-handed. Baroy pitches him, and it's taken on the inside for ball one. So this ball game, the 7th and final game in the 1945 World Series, has now gotten underway here at Wrigley Field in Chicago. Broy throws again, and there's a high curve on the outside for ball 2. So Hank has gotten behind now to the Detroit shortstop. 2 balls, no strikes. The outfield playing straight away and not very deep on Skeeter Webb. Broy throws another curve in there that's good for a strike. And now it's 2-1. Webb has had 4 hits in 23 at-bats here in the World Series of 1945. He takes the next pitch, and it's right through the middle for a called strike, and that's 2-2. 2 balls, 2 strikes. The first hitter up for Detroit here in the very top half of the first inning. Broy kicks, twists, throws a high curve, and almost got away from Livingston. That's ball 3 to Skeeter Webb. 3-2. Hank Broy on the mound for Chicago. His battery mate is Mickey Livingston. Broy throws 3-2. Webb swings on it. There's a clean base hit through the hole between first and second and into right field. And Skeeter Webb opens the top of the first inning with a single to right field. That, incidentally, in the series is hit number 19 off Broy. Hit number 1 off him this afternoon. The batter now hitting at .217 is second baseman Eddie Mayo of Detroit. He hits left-handed and is opening his stance more of late. He pulls that right foot down toward first base. Sort of guards the plate slightly from behind. Broy checks his runner at first, throws to the plate, Mayo swings on it. There's another clean base hit right through the hole into right field. Skeeter Webb is coming off second base. There's Nicholson's throw into third, but it's not nearly in time. With the hit and run on, Webb moves into third base as Mayo singles behind him into right field. That's hit number 2 off Broy, and that's the 20th base hit he's given up here in the 1945 World Series. And Paul Derringer starts hurriedly to get ready down in the Chicago bullpen. So big Paul Derringer is starting to throw very rapidly. Runners at first and third for Detroit. No outs. And here is Doc Kramer, who is tied for the number 4 spot in hitting honors of all the ball players playing in the series. He's hitting at .333, as is Captain Hank Greenberg. But Kramer, hitting left-handed, is up there now. There's a quick throw to first base just to keep Mayo close. Cavaretta returns that ball to the mound. Now Broy is ready. Checks the plate. Throws to the plate. There's a low curve on the outside to Doc Kramer for ball 1. 1 ball, no strikes. This is the top of the first inning, and the Detroit Tigers are threatening. Broy checks a runner at first, now at third, then throws a high curve in there that's blooped out into short left field. It may fall in for a base hit. It does fall in. Here comes Webb in from third, easily to score. And it's 1-0 Detroit. Skeeter Webb was on at third base. Doc Kramer hit an outside pitch and blooped it out behind third into left field. And Hughes, the shortstop, went back, and he couldn't get it. So the first run comes in, and that's hit number 3 off Broy, and I think that's going to be all for Hank. The score is 1-0 in favor of Detroit, and that is the 6th run Hank Broy has given up in the 1945 World Series, and it's definitely an earned run. All 6 runs he has given up have been earned. And I believe Paul Derringer is going to be called upon right here in the top half of the first inning. Yes, here comes Paul Derringer. So Broy can't get anybody out in the top half of the first inning. This is quite a spot for the veteran Paul Derringer to be coming into. He'll pitch first of all to Hank Greenberg. That's a pretty tough customer. So Paul Derringer is being called upon. Hank Broy apparently did not have his stuff this afternoon against Detroit. So Derringer has come on. As far as Derringer is concerned, he's done a little pitching before in this series also. He's pitched 3 2/3 innings. There's a round of applause for Hank Broy. As far as World Series appearance prior to this year, Paul Derringer has won 2 and lost 4. Derringer pitched, if you recall, for St. Louis, the Cardinals, also for the Cincinnati Reds in the National League. He pitched in the 31 series, he pitched in the 39 series, and his last series was in 1940. He was with Cincinnati then and pitched against these self-same Detroit Tigers. And his series record up until now is 2 wins and 4 defeats. Paul's a grand veteran of the game. Kentucky born and bred, and he's out there right now. Pitch for Chicago. The pitch, as we said, first of all to Hank Greenberg. Now here's the position in the top of the first inning. 1 run has been scored by Detroit. We'll review it for you. Webb singled through the hole between first and second and out into right field on a 3-2 pitch. Eddie Mayo came up then, and with the hit-and-run flash, Skeeter Webb was on his way for second. And Eddie Mayo, a left-handed hitter, drilled the ball nicely between first and second and into right to put Webb on at third. Then Doc Kramer came up and hit a fast outside pitch and bluked it into left field for a base hit. And that put Mayo on second and scored Webb from third. So there are no outs here in the top of the first inning. The Tigers lead 1-0, and Greenberg is up at bat. He's had 7 hits in 21 tries here in this World Series, and he's hitting at .333. Tall, right-hand hitter, stands just off the plate. Now Derringer is ready. He'll make his first pitch here in the first inning. He throws, and there's a bunt pushed down to first base. Phil Cavarretta picks it up, steps over on the first base line, and tags Greenberg out unassisted as the runners move on. So Greenberg, despite the fact he's a terrific slugger, was sent up by Steve O'Neill to sacrifice the boys along, and he successfully did so. Phil Cavarretta taking care of the putout at first base. So Kramer on the sacrifice moves over to second base, and Eddie Mayo moves down to third. Now here's Roy Cullenbine, who is hitting at .250. And they're going to intentionally walk Cullenbine. Despite the fact that he's only had 5 hits and 20 times up, Cullenbine can be a pretty tough customer. So Charlie Grimm has ordered Derringer to put him on. There's the second ball pitched way wide. There's the third one. And now pitch out number 4. That's the 6th time that Roy Cullenbine has drawn a base on balls here in this World Series. That is the first base on balls issued this afternoon. It's given up by Derringer. Now with the bases loaded, Cullenbine at first, Kramer at second, Mayo at third, and 1 out. The batter up there is Rudy York. It's a 1-0 ball game in favor of the Detroit Tigers, and it's tooth and nail here this afternoon, and it will be for the entire length of this ball game. Derringer winds up slowly, delivers, change of pace curve. It's in for a strike. That was a 3/4 overhand curveball, the change pace variety, and big Rudy York took it. Eddie Mayo leads down off third. Kramer steps off second, and Cullenbine moves off first. Derringer pitches, York takes, and it's a low curve under his knees for ball 1. 1 ball, 1 strike is the count on Rudy York. He's hitting at .208 for his work in the series. He's had 5 hits for 24 official at-bats. We've got a lot of activity down in the Chicago bullpen. Now Derringer pitches, York takes, and there's a fast one in for a strike. Big Umpah just reared back and fogged it in. He looked like the Derringer of old that time. He doesn't throw that high hard one so much anymore. But when he cuts it loose, it's still got plenty of that stuff on it. Down in the bullpen, Claude Passot and Hy Vandenberg are both getting ready for Chicago. Now here comes the next 1-2 delivery. York takes it. It's a high curve to level off the count at 2-2. 2 balls, 2 strikes. The bases are jammed here with Tigers in the top of the first inning. Only 1 out. Detroit has once scored, and they lead 1-0. Beroy is out of there now, and Paul Derringer is trying to put out this Detroit fire. Derringer kicks high. The big 6-footer throws, and there's a low sweeping curve on the outside for ball 3. Derringer stands 6'4" and weighs 230 pounds. 39-year-old veteran, and he has plenty of pressure on his shoulders right now. But he's been in spots like this before. Here's the 3-2 pitch to Rudy York. It's a fast curve. It's hit out to right field. It may fall in for a base hit. Nicholson goes over near the line, and it just falls foul. It just falls foul by inches out back of right field. Rudy York almost hit one, but it just veered off and went foul by inches way deep in the corner. So that means that Rudy York is going to have to come back and do it all over again. Paul Derringer is going to have to throw another 3-2 pitch to a very dangerous hitter. That's a tense situation here in the top half of the first inning. The 7th game of the World Series here at Wrigley Field in Chicago. And now the sun is coming out. It's getting a little more brilliant down on the diamond. Still very cool. Quite a bit of wind blowing from behind home out toward center field. Here's the 3-2 pitch. York swings and fouls it off. The count stays at 3-2. In case you just tuned in or just hooked up with us, The score is 1-0 Detroit. One out, the bases loaded, and Rudy York at bat with the count of 3-2, and Derringer has relieved Baroy. He pitches now, and York swings, and there's a high foul up to the right of the plate. Mickey Livingston scoots back, but he can't get it. It's way back into the stands. So the count stays at 3-2 on Rudy York. The Chicago infield playing their normal fielding depth. Of course, they're hoping that Derringer will get Rudy York to hit onto the ground. And that's just the thing that the Tigers do not want to see happen. The outfield is playing very deep to Rudy York. They have a right to do so because he clouts a long ball. He gave evidence of that down at Briggs Stadium in Detroit. He's probably hit the longest ball in this entire series. He hit that ball well over 400 feet, and it was caught. Down in the bullpen for the Chicago Cubs, still throwing very hard, Claude Passau and Hy Vandenberg, just in case Derringer has any trouble here in trying to get Detroit out at the top of the first inning. We'll go over the situation for you. At third base is Eddie Mayo. At second base is Doc Kramer. And at first base, purposely walked, is Roy Cullenbine. So the bases are jammed. Score 1-0 Tigers. And Derringer's ready to throw 3-2 to Rudy York. Down it rides. York swings on it. There's a high infield pop-up. Down at shortstop is Stanley Hack floating in front of Hughes, and he takes it for the out. So that's the second out now for Detroit in the top half of the first inning. And Paul Derringer came down behind the plate to back up that play just in case. And he picked up Mickey Livingston's mask and handed it to Mickey and patted him on the back as if to say, "You helped me get him out of that one." Well, that was the all-important out as far as Derringer was concerned. Still, he's not out of the woods by a long shot. The bases are still loaded here with Tigers in the top of the first inning. And Jimmy Outlaw, who is hitting at 167, is standing in. Outlaw, a right-handed choke hitter, stands deep at the plate, and the little fellow sort of crouches over slightly from the waist. Derringer pitches him, and Outlaw takes. And there's a low curve at his knees for ball one. Mayo takes his lead off third. It's a generous lead. Derringer's paying him no mind. He's busily engaged pitching to Outlaw, the Detroit third baseman. Outlaw's had 4 hits and 24 at-bats in this series. Derringer pitches him, and there's a curveball that slides off on the inside for ball 2. The outfield has stepped up a couple of steps to Outlaw. He doesn't hit a particularly long ball. He's more of a punch hitter. Now Derringer, big 6'4" right-hander, delivers, and there's a high curve right off the point of the chin of Outlaw for ball 3. 3 balls, no strikes. Derringer visits that rosin bag. As far as he's concerned, there's an awful lot riding with every pitch he makes. Down comes the next one. Outlaw takes it, and it's on the inside for ball 4, and that forces in Mayo from third. That's the second walk given up by Derringer, but he lost this man. He walked Cullenbine purposely. However, that run is charged against Baroy. So it's a 2-0 ball game now in favor of the Detroit Tigers. Paul Richards comes wandering up to the plate to do a little hitting for Detroit. He's the 8th man to come up here in the top half of the first inning. So Cullenbine moves over to second, and Kramer takes his station at third as Outlaw goes down on the walk and takes his position at first. The bases are still loaded, still 2 outs. Score Detroit 2, Chicago nothing. Derringer winds slowly, kicks high, throws a fast curve that's low under the knees of Richards for ball 1. This tall Texan stands almost straight up and down at the plate and hits him right-handed. He stands deep just as far back as he possibly can. He's hitting at 133, 2 for 15. He swings on the next pitch and falls down as he foul tips it. Well, the count on Richards now is 1-1. 1 ball, 1 strike. The outfield fans slightly around the left, and out in left field, Peanuts Lowry is playing deep for Paul Richards. Hughes at shortstop has come down a couple of steps toward the foul line, the left field foul line, and he's playing deep in the hole at shortstop. Derringer throws. There's a fast one swung on and fouled back into the screen for strike 2. So the count on Richards is 1 ball, 2 strikes. There are 2 outs on Detroit here in the top of the first inning. They lead the Cubs by a margin of 2 runs as the score stands. Detroit 2, Chicago nothing. Derringer in a lot of trouble, not of his own making, but nevertheless he's had to shoulder the burden. He's out there. He throws 1 and 2 now, and Richards swings. There's a fly ball going deep into left field. It may drop in and it may not. It is in fair territory, drops in the corner. In comes Kramer to score. Cullenvine is also coming in. Outlaw comes around, and he too scores. It's a double for Richards. Well, 3 more runs come piling in for Detroit here in the top of the first inning. Detroit has a total now of 5. The man at the plate is Hal Newhouser, hitting left-handed, and he takes the first pitch high for ball 1. Richards leads down off second base. Derringer pitches, and there's one swung on and missed for a strike. So the count on Newhouser is 1-1. Newhouser has just been announced with the count of 1-1 on him. He swings on the next pitch and hits a foul ball out back of left field, and it falls away into the seats. So the count on him now is 1 ball, 2 strikes. Paul Richards just hammered in 3 more runs for the Tigers, and they lead 5-0. Derringer throws. There's a low curve under the knees of Newhouser for ball 2. That makes his count 2-2. Hal hitting left-handed, standing very deep at the plate, sort of guarding it from behind. 4 runs have been scored off Baroy and 1 run off Derringer. Now Paul is ready. Down comes the next pitch, and Newhouser hits one down to second base. Johnson comes up with it at second, throws to Phil Cavaretta, and that's all for Newhouser, going out 4-3. Well, we'll count up the damage now. In the first inning, as 9 men came to bat for Detroit. A total of 5 runs on 1, 2, 3, 4 hits. There was 1 man left, and there were no errors. So at the end of the top of the first inning, Detroit leads in the 7th game of the World Series, 5-0. And now, men, before this final game of the 1945 World Series goes any further, let me point out that you look better and feel better when you shave the smooth, refreshing All Gillette way. Yes, when you soften your whiskers with Gillette shaving cream, lather or brushless, and whisk them off with today's Gillette Blue Blade in your Gillette razor, your face looks and feels its very best. You see, Gillette shaving creams are thoroughgoing, fast-acting beard softeners that hold abundant moisture and stay wet on your face. What's more, today's Gillette Blue Blade has the sharpest, smoothest finished edges that ever sailed through a fellow's whiskers. Working together, they give you the swellest shaves of your life. Ask your dealer for Gillette brushless or Gillette lather, a quarter, and shave this easier All Gillette way. Remember, look sharp, feel sharp, be sharp. Use Gillette Blue Blades with the sharpest edges ever honed. Now for the last half of inning number 1. It's a 5-0 ball game in favor of the Detroit Tigers as they went out and got themselves 5 right in the very first frame. They got themselves 5 runs on 4 hits. 3 hits coming off Baroy and 1, a damaging double, coming off the offering of Derringer. Now Stanley Hack gets a round of applause as he steps up to the plate to be the first Chicago Cub hitter. He's leading all hitters here in the series at 440. He takes the first pitch as Newhouser zips a fast one in there for a strike. Hack hitting left-handed, stands deep at the plate. Newhouser takes his sign from Paul Richards, pumps once. 24-year-old left-hander delivers, and Hack hits the ball down to third, and it's foul just outside of the bag. So the count on Stanley Hack is no balls, 2 strikes. Hack's had 11 hits for 25 at-bats here in this series for a percentage of .440 as he stands at the plate this red-hot second. If he gets another base hit, he's going to be able to tie a record of long standing. We'll tell you about that if and when it happens. He takes the next pitch, and it's a curve in there for called strike 3, and Hack knew it. So the first man Newhouser faces, he strikes out here in the last of the first inning. And that's strikeout number 1 for Newhouser this afternoon. That's strikeout number 13 for him in his 11 and 2/3 innings pitched in the World Series. Now Don Johnson hitting at 167. It's right-handed, is standing in. He takes a look at the first pitch, and it's a high curve up above the letters of the shirt. That's ball 1. 1 ball, no strikes. Newhouser gets ready. Young Thaw throws a fast one in there that's hit out over shortstop and out into left center field. Doc Kramer chases it, picks it up, but Johnson is on his way to second. Here comes the throw. It's not in time, and Johnson slides, and he's safe at second with a double. Don Johnson has just gotten his 5th hit on his 25th at-bat here in the series. Doubles to left center field. And Peanuts Lowry, hitting a 280, is standing up to the plate right now. Newhouser delivers him, and Lowry takes a high curve up above his shoulder. That's ball 1. Peanuts Lowry hits right-handed and stands deep at the plate. Legs wide, spread apart. Newhouser throws a fast one in there, and Lowry swings and doesn't get it. The 1-1 count now on the Chicago left fielder, Harry Peanuts Lowry. Johnson with his double is on at second base. That is the second extra base blow here in the 7th game of the World Series. Both of them have been hitting the left field. Richards in the first inning for Detroit hit one very nicely down into the left field corner. That double of his scored 3 runs for Detroit. They lead, you know, right now, 5-0. Newhouser checks back at second. Looks at Johnson. Now throws to the plate. Lowry pushes the bunt back toward the mound. It's picked up by Newhouser, and he bobbles it for the moment. Picks up, throws, not in time. Well, Hal Newhouser went after Peanuts Lowry's bunt, and by the time he got his hands on it, he bobbled it for the moment, and then too late to first base. So Chicago has runners at first and second. The official scorer will give us his verdict in a minute. But Al Benton is starting to get ready down in the Tiger bullpen. Now here's Phil Cabaretta, hitting left-handed. And an error is being charged against Hal Newhouser. So Johnson is on at second, and Lowry is on at first. Down it comes. Phil swings on it. It's a base hit to right field. Johnson comes whistling by third, comes on in to score, and Lowry slides into third. Phil Cabaretta teed off on one and smacked it right past Eddie Mayo and out into right field for a base hit. And on the blow, Don Johnson came on in from second to score. And Peanuts Lowry, running on the blow, moved into third base. So now Chicago has runners at first and third, 1 out, and the score is 5-1 in favor of Detroit. And there's a big conference right now down at the mound with Hal Newhouser. Eddie Mayo is in on that conference, and Paul Richards. And he has Paul Richards, for a new shin protector. His shin guard has been snapped in this last operation. So he's getting a new one. Time has been called for it. And that off Hal Newhouser, we would like to go back and say, is the second hit here in this ball game. It is the 17th hit he's given up in the World Series, and that is the 12th run that has been gotten off Newhouser. The first one this afternoon. It's a 5-1 ball game in favor of the Detroit Tigers. And the Chicago Cubs are also bearing their claws here in the last half of the first. They're trying desperately to get back into this ball game because it's winner today taking the series. Now standing up at the plate is Andy Pafko, who's hitting at 208. He takes the first curve, and it's in there for a strike. Just sort of automatically call it a curve when Newhouser delivers because he's got quite an assortment. Pafko is hitting at 208, as we said. He has had 5 hits for 24 at-bats. Pafko swings on the next pitch. There's a ball hit to short. It's played back to Mayo for 1 out. The throw on to first, 2 outs. That's the first double play here this afternoon. Andy Pafko hit one down to Skeeter Webb at short. He played it very nicely back to Eddie Mayo for the force out on Cabaretta coming down. And then Mayo whipped it over to first base. And that's all. Well, Chicago scores 1 time here in the last half of the first inning. 1 run on 2 hits. There was a man left, and there was 1 Detroit error. So at the end of 1 full inning of play, the score stands 5-1 in favor of the Detroit Tigers as we go into the top half of inning number 2 right here at Wrigley Field in Chicago. And Paul Derringer comes out of the dugout, moves out to the mound now to start the top of the second inning. But before we get into the top of the second inning, we have just a few moments, seconds as a matter of fact, to pause for station identification. So remember, men, look sharp, feel sharp, be sharp. Use Gillette Blue Blades with the sharpest edges ever honed. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
This is WGN Chicago, serving the Middle West.